my streaming service, Dark and Twisted TV, to watch my exclusive animated horror series, My Girlfriend Wants to Kill Me, and more. Others have joined. So what are you waiting for? Join today. Link in the description. Now on to the show. I'm sure you've all heard of the creepy college roommate horror stories that has been plastered all over the internet for the past few years. But I think my story is the craziest and most horrifying of them all. And by the end of this story, you will see why. I was overly excited to be accepted into Harvard University. Not many people can say the same thing. It was an honor, and my parents couldn't be more proud of me. Lots of hard work and studying had finally paid off. So the day had finally arrived, as my parents and I were on the road for over 2 hours driving there. For the entire ride, my parents not only bragged about how proud they were of me, but they also gave me so many warnings that it felt as if my ears were about to explode. Stay away from boys. Stay away from the booze. Stay away from those wild frat parties that are known to happen quite often during the college days. But I have to admit, I was a bit curious about the frat parties. Even though I doubted seriously that I would attend. I mean, I myself am an introvert, and the thought of parties and large crowds terrifies me. I know what you're thinking. Gosh, what a dork she is. But that's just me, and I don't apologize for being the way that I am. Also, I had decided to rent out a 2-bedroom house that was located directly behind the university, and I was to share it with a roommate. Anyways, we had just arrived at my new dwelling, and I was excited to start this new journey. But I have to admit, I was a little sad that I would be away from my parents for a while. But my father said, look on the bright side. We would see each other during the holidays. Not to mention, we would FaceTime as well. Back in my parents' college days, they didn't have the luxury. So I picked up my bag, kissed them goodbye, and headed inside. I had just finished unpacking when the door slowly opened. There stood a female. She introduced herself as Kimmy, my new roommate. Later on that night, we ordered food and had gotten more acquainted. She was super nice and seemed like we were going to be great roommates. A few weeks had passed, and the greatness had gone sour. Her cleanliness had transformed into dirtiness. She had become a slob. I usually came home late due to my working long hours at my new job as a waitress at the diner down the road. Anyone who works long, grueling hours knows that the last thing that you want to do when you come home is clean a dirty-ass house. I kid you not, every single night that I came home, she was passed out, drunk on the floor, and there would be a pool of vomit right next to her that she refused to clean up, and there would be piles of dirty dishes stacked up in the kitchen, as well as dirty laundry all over the place. And I know this sounds gross, but she even left bloody pads and tampons all over the bathroom floor and on the counter as well. We even had manifested a bug infestation. Huge black cockroaches everywhere. And get this, when I confronted her about it, she would deny everything and even had the nerve to blame it on me. This situation was out of control and had become toxic. So one night after I came home from work, she was not the only one drunk and passed out next to her own pool of vomit as usual. But there was some random, homeless-looking guy who was actually sleeping in my bed, and he reeked of pure vodka and cigarettes. It was horrendous. This was the last straw. I was done, beyond pissed off, fed up to capacity, and I started packing my things immediately. All I wanted to do is get the hell out of there. So I called up a friend of mine to pick me up and take me back to my parents' house, at least until I figured things out. So she picked me up and we hit the road. I was so glad to be out of that place and away from that psycho bitch. A week later, after being back home at my parents', it felt so good to be back in my old room where everything was neat and tidy. To be 100% honest, I was even starting to question if the college life was for me. I needed some time to sort things out, but in the meantime, I texted a few of my friends and we were going to meet up at the local pub to play pool, have some drinks, and just hang out. I asked my parents if I could take their car and they said yes, but I needed to be back at a decent hour, so I agreed and was on my way. As I traveled down the road, it began to downpour as well as lightning and thunder, and the thickening of the fog made it almost impossible to see the road. And then I heard something in the back seat, but I just figured it was my dad's bowling ball rolling back and forth on the floor. So I paid it no mind and focused on the road. Then, all of a sudden, there was a gun pressed firmly against my temple. It was Kimmy. You thought you could just leave me, huh? Abandon me like my mother abandoned me when I was a child. Well, if you refuse to live with me, I refuse to let you live, she said in a creepy whisper. I began to cry as the downpour of rain increased. Then, out of nowhere, we were sideswiped by a truck as the car spun out of control and landed in a ditch. Then everything went black. I woke up a week later in the hospital with a broken leg and a cracked rib, but luckily for me, I was wearing my seatbelt and the doctor said that I was going to be okay. When I asked what happened to Kimmy, he said she was not so lucky. She was dead at the scene. And that was the end of my college roommate nightmare. Stony had been my best friend for as long as I could remember. In school, we had spent most of our time either in the principal's office or after school detention instead of class where we should had been. We were always getting into mischief. We were like brothers, practical jokers, connected at the hip, a modern day Beavis and Butthead / Cheech and Chong. As we got older, everyone else matured, but we did not. We spent most of our time in the back of our van, getting high as hell while listening to Snoop Dogg, Wiz Khalifa, and a few other Get High bands. And it didn't stop there. It carried over into college. While our classmates were into football, basketball, and girls, we were into beer and weed. So much to the point that if you smelt the green, we were the ones smoking it. And you could hear the sounds of coughing and laughing from a mile away. As a matter of fact, we went by our nicknames. Mine was 420, as in the saying, it's 420 and time to get high. And Stony was his nickname because he was stoned 24 hours a day. We were voted in high school as the ones to not attend college, but we were sick of living at home with our parents telling us what to do. So we saw college as the perfect opportunity to get away and maybe learn something new as well. So there we were, our first day at Stanford, and we had decided to rent a house instead of a dorm. And I think you know why. It would be nearly impossible to smoke weed in a dorm, so there was not a snowball's chance in hell that was going to happen. We needed our Wheaties. One night, while watching scary movies and getting higher than a kite, we ordered some food due to a bad case of the munchies. So around 11:30 p.m., the pizza delivery guy arrived. So I grabbed some cash from the nightstand and answered the door. "Hey, what up, Holmes?" I said, my eyelids heavy, and I had a bad case of cottonmouth. "That'll be $35.57, he said. I honestly think he was overcharging for the pizza because he obviously knew that we were high, judging from the huge cloud of smoke that we were in, and he knew that we had the munchies. So I gave him the money and began to shut the door, but he halted me with his foot in the way. "Say, may I use your bathroom?" he said. I was about to say no, because usually I never let strangers in, but being high as hell, I said yes and let him in. An hour had passed, and the guy was still in the bathroom, so we both knocked on the door to see if he was okay. But after knocking 6 times, there was still no answer, and it was dead silent. Then, all of a sudden, there was a loud gunshot. We kicked in the door, only to find the most gruesome scene. The guy was laying on the floor with a bullet hole in his head, and his brains were on the outside everywhere. The man must have been going through something and took his own life. But it was a mystery on why he killed himself in our bathroom. We both freaked the fuck out and went into full panic mode, then ran toward the front door just to get the hell out of there. The last thing we wanted was to be in a house with a corpse. As the door flung open, there he was, the delivery guy who had just killed himself in our bathroom. "What the fuck?" we yelled in sync. Then we slammed the door in his face. This was obviously the man's ghost. We then called the cops, but when they arrived and checked the bathroom, there was no body, no blood, and no brains. After being tested at the hospital, we learned that we had smoked a bad batch of weed, and it had us hallucinating the entire time.